It was late in the evening, the kind of evening where the air feels heavy and quiet, and every streetlight flickers like it's fighting to stay alive. I was sitting on the steps outside a small diner on Main Street, nursing a cup of cheap coffee that had already gone cold. People rushed past, too busy with their own lives to notice me sitting there, just another face lost in the crowd. That's when I saw him. A teenager, thin as a rail, stumbling down the sidewalk like his legs might give out at any second. His clothes were torn, his sneakers caked with mud, and his hair hung in his face, greasy and tangled. He looked like he hadn't eaten in days, but what struck me most were his eyes. Wide, darting, searching, like he was running from something only he could see. He stopped in front of me, out of breath, his chest heaving as if he had sprinted a mile straight. For a moment, I thought he might just ask for money or food, the way most runaways do. But instead, he leaned close, his voice so low I almost didn't catch it. "I know where she is," he whispered. His lips trembled. "The mayor's wife. I can save her." My first instinct was to laugh. The whole town had been buzzing for days about her disappearance, posters on every corner, reporters camped out in front of City Hall, news alerts flashing on every TV. Everyone had their theories, but no one had answers. And now this ragged boy was claiming he knew? It didn't make sense. But before I could say anything, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. His hand shook so hard I thought he might drop it. When he opened his palm, my heart skipped. It was a gold bracelet, delicate and unmistakable, with the mayor's wife's initials engraved on the inside. I had seen it dozens of times in pictures, at charity events, parades, even in the news coverage since she'd gone missing. I stared at him, trying to read his face. He swallowed hard. "I didn't steal it. She gave it to me. She wanted someone to find it. To prove she's still alive." The words hit me like ice water. My mind scrambled for logic, for reason, but all I could see were his terrified eyes, pleading with me to believe him. He shifted nervously, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected someone to come tearing around the corner at any second. "You don't get it," he said, his voice cracking. "They're gonna kill her. Tonight. If I don't take you there now, she won't make it." The street felt colder suddenly, like the world itself was listening. I looked around, cars passing, people walking, life carrying on as if none of this was happening. But in that moment, it felt like the boy and I were standing on the edge of something bigger, something dangerous. I wanted to question him more, demand answers, but his fear was so raw, so real, that the words stuck in my throat. He was trembling, clutching the bracelet like it was the only proof keeping him from being dismissed as crazy. And maybe he was crazy, but if he wasn't, if there was even the slightest chance he was telling the truth, then the mayor's wife's life depended on it. I leaned forward, my voice low. "If you're lying, this ends badly for you. But if you're telling the truth, then we don't have much time." For the first time, he let out a shaky breath, like someone had finally believed him. He nodded quickly, eyes glistening with tears he refused to let fall. And just like that, I realized this runaway wasn't just another lost kid on the street. He might be the only person who knew the truth about the mayor's wife. And if I followed him, I was stepping into something I couldn't turn back from. The night around us seemed to grow darker, the hum of the diner fading into silence. He gripped the bracelet tighter, his knuckles white, and whispered again, "Please. We have to go. Now." That was the moment everything began. The runaway. The secret. The impossible claim. I didn't know it yet, but nothing about my life, or his, would ever be the same again. I froze there on the steps of the diner, staring at this runaway kid holding a piece of gold that could change everything. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. My mind raced. If he was telling the truth, then the mayor's wife was alive but running out of time. If he was lying, I was about to get dragged into something dangerous and pointless. Either way, the choice I made right then would set everything in motion. The boy's voice cracked as he leaned in closer. "They'll kill her. I heard them. She doesn't have much longer." His hands trembled so badly I thought he might drop the bracelet. He clutched it tight against his chest like it was the last shred of hope he had left. I studied him more carefully. His cheeks were hollow, his lips chapped, his eyes sunken. This was a kid who'd been out on the streets for too long. But beneath the dirt and exhaustion, there was a look in his eyes that struck me, desperation mixed with certainty. He wasn't just making up a story to get food or money. He was terrified. I sighed, running a hand over my face. Why me? Why come to me? His gaze darted toward the diner, then back to me. Because you're the only one who didn't walk past me. You looked at me. Everyone else, they don't even see me. But I can't do this alone. Please. That hit harder than I expected. I had almost dismissed him too, almost stood up and walked away. But something about his words sank into my chest. The choice wasn't just about whether to believe him, it was about whether I could live with myself if I ignored him and found out later he'd been telling the truth. The street around us buzzed with the ordinary rhythm of life. A couple exited the diner laughing, cars rolled through the intersection, neon signs flickered in the distance. None of them knew what this boy had just told me. None of them knew that somewhere, maybe just a few miles away, a woman's life was hanging by a thread. I felt my stomach twist. If I said no, if I turned him away, I'd never forgive myself. I stood up slowly, brushing the dust off my jeans. All right. Show me where. For the first time since he appeared, his shoulders eased a little. His lips parted like he wanted to say thank you, but no words came. He just nodded quickly and took a step forward. Before we left, I glanced down at the bracelet one more time. The initials were clear, perfectly etched into the gold. There was no denying it, it belonged to her. That single piece of evidence tipped the scales. Still, I couldn't shake the fear curling in my chest. I was about to follow a runaway kid into the dark with nothing but his word to go on. If this turned out to be a trap, or some sick game, I was walking straight into it. I hesitated again, and he noticed. His voice dropped low, steady despite the tears in his eyes. If we wait, it'll be too late. You have to trust me. And maybe I was reckless, maybe I was stupid, but in that moment, trust felt like the only option left. Before I continue, I need to pause here. Stories like this, they aren't just stories. They're warnings, they're lifelines, they're pieces of truth hidden inside chaos. If you want to keep hearing them, to stay with me through what happened next, hit that subscribe button now. It means more than you know. I tightened my jacket and motioned for him to lead the way. The boy's steps were fast and restless, like every second mattered. He kept glancing behind us as though someone might appear out of the shadows and drag him back. That was when I realized, this wasn't just about saving the mayor's wife. This was about him too. Whatever he'd escaped from, it was still haunting him, and now I was part of it. The choice was made. And from the moment I followed that runaway into the night, there was no turning back. The runaway boy led me out of town like he had done it 100 times before. His steps were quick, nervous, but certain, as if he knew every crack in the sidewalk, every alley that twisted between the buildings. I kept close behind him, my eyes scanning the streets. At that hour, the town looked different, shadows stretched longer, neon signs buzzed louder, and the silence between footsteps felt heavier than it should have. We crossed the railroad tracks on the edge of town, the metal rails gleaming under the moonlight. The air smelled like rust and oil, thick and cold in my lungs. The boy didn't slow down. He cut across the tracks, then headed toward the tree line that loomed like a dark wall against the horizon. I hesitated for a second. Those woods weren't the kind of place you walked into at night. People in town told stories, hunters who got lost, kids who dared each other to go in and never made it far. But the boy didn't look back, not once. He stepped right into the shadows of the trees like he belonged there. I followed. The sound changed instantly. The hum of the streets, the distant engines, the faint chatter of the town, it all vanished, swallowed by the forest. All I could hear now was the crunch of leaves beneath our shoes and the constant rush of my own breathing. The branches above tangled so thick that the moonlight barely touched the ground. It felt like walking into another world. The boy raised a finger to his lips. Quiet, he whispered. His voice was almost too soft to hear. They've got lookouts. That word, lookouts, sent a cold shiver crawling up my spine. Whoever they were, this wasn't some harmless group hiding out in the woods. This was organized. Dangerous. We moved slowly, crouching low when the trees opened into clearings. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat loud enough I was afraid it might give us away. Every crack of a branch beneath my shoe felt like thunder. The deeper we went, the thicker the air became. Damp earth, pine needles, and the faint sting of smoke mixed together. Somewhere in the distance, I caught the sound of voices, muffled, angry, sharp. The boy froze when he heard them too. He crouched low, his body trembling. I whispered, "Who are they?" He shook his head quickly. Not now. Just follow me. We crept forward until we reached a fallen tree. The trunk stretched wide, moss covering its bark like a blanket. The boy pressed a finger against it, motioning for me to crouch. I lowered myself, peering through the gaps in the branches. And that's when I saw it. An old hunting cabin, half-rotten but still standing, its windows glowing faintly with the flicker of yellow light. The roof sagged in the middle, shingles missing like teeth knocked out of a mouth, but smoke drifted from the chimney, curling into the dark sky. Through the window, shadows moved, 3, maybe 4 men. Their voices carried through the air in fragments. Harsh, impatient, like they were waiting for something. The boy leaned close, his breath hot against my ear. She's in there. Tied up. They don't think anyone knows. The words sank deep into me. For days the entire town had been searching, and here she was, hidden in the woods, guarded by men with no intention of letting her leave alive. I pressed my back against the trunk, trying to calm my breathing. My mind raced with questions. Who are these men? Why take the mayor's wife? And why would a runaway boy be the one who knew about it? But as I looked at him, his fists clenched, his face pale, his jaw tight, I realized he wasn't making any of this up. This wasn't a game or a wild story for attention. He was risking his life just by being here. The boy's eyes locked on mine. We have to do something. Tonight. I didn't answer right away. My gaze drifted back to the cabin, to the light flickering through those dirty windows, to the shadows pacing inside. I thought about the mayor's wife, trapped, waiting, maybe even losing hope. And I knew he was right. Tonight was the only chance. I leaned close to him, my voice low, steady. We'll figure it out. But we can't rush in blind. One wrong move, and they'll kill her before we even get close. The boy nodded, but I could see the fear etched deep into his face. Still, there was something else there too, something stronger than fear. Determination. I took another look at that cabin, smoke drifting lazily into the night sky, voices carrying through the forest like warnings. The woods around us were silent, heavy, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. I realized then, we weren't just lost in the forest. We were standing on the edge of something far bigger than either of us understood. And if we stepped forward, there would be no turning back. I grabbed his arm before he could move any closer to the cabin. The firelight flickered through the dirty glass, shadows shifting inside, but all I could focus on was him. His whole body trembled as if fear and adrenaline were warring inside him. His eyes darted back and forth, not toward me, but toward the cabin, like he couldn't bear to look away. How do you know she's in there? I whispered sharply. Tell me the truth. Right now. For a moment, he froze, lips pressed tightly together, his chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. His gaze dropped to the forest floor. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable, until finally he spoke. Because I used to be with them. His voice cracked, almost breaking into a whisper. I ran away, but not before I heard them planning everything. They brought her here. I knew they were serious. And I knew what they'd do to her if no one stopped them. The words hit me harder than I expected. My grip loosened on his arm, but I didn't let go. You're saying you were one of them? With the men in that cabin? He nodded once, shame washing over his face. Not because I wanted to be. I didn't have a choice. His eyes finally lifted to meet mine, and in them I saw something raw. Not guilt alone, but years of pain. I didn't have anywhere else to go. No family. No one who cared. They found me. Fed me, gave me a place to sleep. But it wasn't kindness. It was control. Every day was about fear. They made me do things I didn't want to do. They told me if I left, I wouldn't survive. But I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep watching what they did. The forest air felt heavier as he spoke. The boy's voice trembled, but it carried the weight of someone who had lived far beyond his years. The night I ran, I heard them talking about her. About the mayor's wife. They laughed about it. Said it would send a message. Said no one would dare cross them again. His throat tightened, and he had to stop for a moment, his eyes filling with tears he refused to let fall. I let go of his arm and leaned back against the fallen tree, trying to steady myself. I had thought of him as just a runaway kid, desperate for food, attention, maybe a little pity. But this was different. He wasn't just a runaway. He was an escapee from something darker, something organized and brutal. And somehow, he had found his way to me. "They think I'm dead," he whispered. "That's the only reason I'm still breathing. If they saw me right now, if they knew I was here, I'd be gone before the night ended." His words cut through me. The courage it must have taken for him to come back here, to risk being seen, to drag me into these woods, it was more than most grown men could manage. He wasn't just trying to save her. He was trying to make up for everything he had been forced to be a part of. He clutched the bracelet again, holding it like it was the only proof he had of his redemption. "She gave me this when they weren't looking." Slipped it into my hand and whispered, "Someone will believe you. Someone has to." He shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. "I didn't think anyone ever would. Until you." The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. The boy wasn't lying. He wasn't exaggerating. He was broken, haunted, and terrified, but he was telling the truth. I lowered my voice, trying to steady him. "Why me? Why come to me?" "Because you stopped. You didn't ignore me like the rest. I didn't know if I could trust you, but I had to try. I can't do this alone." His words came out with a force that startled me. "If we don't stop them, they'll kill her. And it'll be my fault, because I knew and I did nothing." I studied his face, lit faintly by the glow slipping through the trees. The dirt, the exhaustion, the scars of life on the streets, all of it couldn't hide the truth in his eyes. He was a boy who had been dragged through hell, and yet, standing here, he was still fighting to do the right thing. The forest seemed to fall into silence around us. Even the wind paused, the leaves still. The voices from the cabin carried faintly through the night, muffled threats echoing in the distance. I reached out, resting my hand lightly on his shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time I saw something flicker across his face that hadn't been there before. Not fear. Not shame. Hope. And I knew, right there in those woods, that this runaway boy wasn't just a kid with a story. He was the only chance the mayor's wife had left. And maybe, just maybe, he was the only chance he had at saving himself too. We crouched in the damp leaves, the cabin glowing faintly in the distance like a lantern in the dark. Inside, shadows moved back and forth, pacing, arguing, plotting. The mayor's wife was in there, I was sure of it now. But the boy was right too. If we just rushed in, neither of us would make it out alive. I pressed my back against the fallen tree, pulling my phone from my pocket. The screen's glow felt too bright in the thick dark of the forest, so I cupped it in my hand. No signal. The woods were too deep, too far from the edge of town. Panic tugged at me, but I swallowed it down. There had to be another way. The boy leaned in close. "They'll be watching the front. Always. That's where they expect trouble. But there's a back entrance, an old storage door. It sticks sometimes, but I can get it open." I stared at him. His voice was steady, confident. He wasn't guessing, he knew. He had been inside that cabin before, maybe even lived in it. Every detail he gave confirmed what he'd told me earlier. "And then what?" I asked. "We can't just walk in and untie her." His eyes darted nervously toward the window. "No. We can't. But we can stall. If they think I came back, if they think I still belong to them, it might buy us time." The idea hit me like a blow. "You'd walk back in there? After everything they did to you?" He swallowed hard, but he didn't look away. "If it's the only way to save her, yeah. I'll do it." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. This boy, half-starved, broken, still carrying the weight of what those men had forced him to do, was willing to step back into hell just to give a stranger a chance at survival. My chest tightened with something I couldn't quite name, fear, admiration, guilt, maybe all of it at once. I took a slow breath and forced my mind to work. "If you go in, you can't act scared. You'll have to convince them you came back because you didn't have anywhere else to go. That'll keep them talking. And while they're focused on you, I'll point them away from her," he finished for me. His lips pressed into a thin line. "Give you a chance to get her out." The simplicity of it made it sound almost possible. But the risks were staggering. If they saw me, if they even suspected for a second, it was over, for both of us, and for her. I checked my phone again, moving higher up the ridge until a faint bar of service flickered on the corner of the screen. My fingers shook as I typed a message to my friend at the sheriff's department. I found her. Cabin in the woods past the tracks. Hurry. I dropped a pin and hit send, praying the signal was strong enough to carry it through. The boy's eyes followed every move I made. Will they come? They'll come, I said, forcing confidence into my voice. But we can't wait for them to get here. We have to keep her alive until they do. The forest pressed around us, silent except for the occasional snap of a branch underfoot in the distance. My pulse hammered in my ears. We had a plan, but it was thin, fragile. One mistake and it would collapse. The boy crouched lower, his hands balled into fists. They'll believe me at first. I know what to say. But once they start asking questions, once they figure out I've been gone too long, his voice trailed off. You don't need to buy forever, I said firmly. Just a few minutes. Long enough for me to reach her. Long enough for the police to get here. His jaw clenched. He nodded once. I studied his face, the dirt and fear written into every line, but also something else, something almost unshakable. Determination. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about fear or shame or running away. This was about saving her, and maybe, in some way, saving himself. I leaned closer. If anything goes wrong, you run. Do you understand me? Don't wait for me. Don't try to fight. Just run. But he shook his head before I even finished. I won't leave her. Not again. The words sank deep. I wanted to argue, but I knew it was useless. He wasn't just a runaway kid anymore. He was carrying something heavier than I could ever understand, and this was his way of setting it down. The plan was reckless, fragile, built on lies and seconds and hope. But in that moment, it was all we had. The boy stood slowly, his small frame outlined against the faint glow from the cabin window. He looked back at me, eyes wide but steady. This is it, he whispered. And with that, he turned toward the cabin, stepping into the firelight like a ghost returning to the place he had barely escaped. I stayed in the shadows, waiting for the moment to move. My heart pounded so loud it felt like the forest itself could hear it. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. The night air was damp and heavy, and the woods were alive with the quiet whispers of insects and distant rustling leaves. I had never felt fear and determination so tightly wound inside me. Every step I took made the damp soil cling to my shoes, and my heart hammered like it wanted to escape my chest. The mayor's wife was out here somewhere, hidden, trapped, maybe worse, and it was on me, a runaway nobody, to bring her back. The plan had sounded simple when we whispered it around the small fire earlier: sneak through the back path, cut across the old logging trail, and reach the cabin without drawing attention. But simple plans rarely survive contact with reality. The men holding her weren't amateurs. I could tell by the way they patrolled, their flashlights sweeping like predators' eyes across the trees. I crouched low behind a thick oak, the bark rough against my cheek as I tried to steady my breathing. From my vantage point, I could see the faint glow of a lantern through the cracks in the wooden walls of the cabin. That was where she was being kept. Every muscle in my body screamed at me to charge forward, to just burst through the door, but I knew better. One wrong move, and she'd be gone, or worse. The mayor's aide, Richard, was somewhere nearby, waiting as backup. He had insisted on coming, though I could see the doubt in his eyes when he looked at me. To him, I was just a kid who had no business being here. But to me, this wasn't about proving myself to him, it was about finally doing something that mattered. A shadow shifted near the cabin door. One of the guards leaned lazily against the frame, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. His face lit up just enough for me to catch a glimpse of a scar running from his eyebrow down to his cheek. He wasn't just standing there, he was listening, scanning the woods like he could smell me. I pressed myself lower to the ground, the damp earth chilling my stomach, and prayed the pounding of my heart wasn't loud enough to give me away. Minutes dragged like hours. My mind raced with possibilities. What if she was tied up, gagged, too weak to move? What if I found her too late? That thought cut through me like a knife. I had to act. I picked up a small stone and tossed it far to my right. It landed with a soft crack against a branch. Instantly, the guard straightened, his head snapping toward the sound. He muttered something under his breath and stepped off the porch, flashlight beam cutting through the trees as he moved toward the distraction. My chance had come. I sprinted low, my body weaving between shadows, until I pressed myself against the side of the cabin. My breath was hot and ragged in my throat, but I forced it down. Slowly, I peered through a crack in the wall. Inside, the lantern's glow revealed her. The mayor's wife was tied to a chair, her face pale but fierce. Even through the exhaustion, her eyes burned with a stubborn will to survive. For a moment, I froze. This wasn't some stranger. This was someone's wife, someone's mother. A real person whose life now rested in my hands. My chest tightened, but I pushed the fear down and focused. I slipped around to the back of the cabin, where Richard had promised to meet me. He appeared out of the dark, his suit torn and dirt smeared across his face, but his eyes were sharp. "You actually made it," he whispered, half surprised. "She's inside," I said, my voice barely a breath. "One guard out front, another, not sure." Richard frowned. "We don't have time to wait. You get her loose. I'll deal with anyone who comes back." It wasn't supposed to be like this. He was risking his life for her, and I was about to do the same. But there wasn't time to argue. We nodded at each other, a silent pact formed in the shadows, and I slipped inside through the back door. The air inside was stale, reeking of sweat and damp wood. My eyes adjusted quickly, and I moved toward her. The mayor's wife's eyes widened when she saw me, confusion flickering across her face. "Shoo," I whispered, pulling a small knife from my pocket. The ropes around her wrists were rough, cutting into her skin. I saw the welts, the blood. My jaw clenched, and I worked faster. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind me. I spun around, knife still in hand. Another man had stepped in from the side room, his frame filling the doorway. His eyes locked onto me, and a slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Well, he drawled, reaching for the gun tucked into his belt. "What do we have here? A hero?" My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought it was over. But before he could raise the weapon, Richard burst in from behind, tackling him to the floor. The gun clattered across the wood, sliding to my feet. Without thinking, I kicked it hard, sending it under the table out of reach. "Finish the ropes!" Richard shouted, grappling with the man. My hands worked faster, sawing through the bindings until the last rope snapped free. The mayor's wife gasped as she lifted her arms, blood rushing back into her hands. "You're safe now," I whispered, though the tremor in my voice betrayed how unsure I was. The fight behind me grew louder, furniture crashing as Richard and the man struggled. I grabbed the mayor's wife's hand and pulled her toward the back door. She stumbled, weak from captivity, but she didn't resist. Together, we slipped into the night air. Branches scratched against my arms as we ran through the woods, the sound of Richard's fight echoing behind us. I didn't know if he'd make it out, but I knew I had to keep her moving. She trusted me now, even though I was just a runaway with nothing but desperation to fuel me. When we finally broke through the treeline into the clearing where we had started, the night felt almost unreal, like the world was holding its breath. She collapsed against a fallen log, panting, her eyes still locked on me with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. You're just a boy," she whispered, shaking her head. I swallowed hard, every nerve in my body still electric. "Doesn't matter. You're alive. That's what counts." But deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. The men who had taken her weren't going to stop. And if Richard didn't make it out of that cabin, the weight of what came next would fall entirely on me. The clearing was silent except for the mayor's wife's ragged breathing and my pounding heartbeat. My clothes clung to me, damp with sweat and dirt, and my legs felt like they were carved from stone. We had made it out of the cabin alive, but Richard was still back there. The thought burned in my chest like fire. I turned toward the woods, debating whether to go back, when a loud crack echoed from the direction of the cabin. A gunshot. The mayor's wife flinched, her hands covering her ears. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen, staring at the tree line, waiting for movement. And then, against all odds, Richard stumbled out of the shadows. His face was pale, his shirt torn and smeared with blood, but he was alive. He limped toward us, his hand pressed to his side, and collapsed near the fallen log where the mayor's wife sat. We don't have much time," he gasped. "They'll come after us." I dropped to my knees beside him, trying to help him sit upright. "Can you walk?" Richard shook his head, his jaw clenched tight. "Forget about me. Get her out." But before I could argue, the faint sound of engines rumbled in the distance. Headlights flickered through the trees, bouncing along the dirt path leading to the cabin. They were coming, more men, maybe reinforcements. My chest tightened. There was no way we could outrun them in our condition, not with Richard barely able to stand. Panic clawed at me, but then something shifted inside. I wasn't that scared runaway anymore. I couldn't be. If I gave in now, it would all be over. I helped Richard lean against the log, then grabbed the mayor's wife's hand. "Listen," I said firmly, looking straight into her eyes. "We're getting out of this. I need you to trust me." She nodded, her face pale but her gaze steady. For the first time, she seemed to believe that maybe, just maybe, this boy who had come from nowhere could save her. I remembered the back road we had passed earlier that day, an old service path that cut around the edge of the woods. It was rough, overgrown, but it might give us cover. I pulled both of them to their feet, Richard half dragging, the mayor's wife leaning heavily on my shoulder, and we stumbled through the brush. The roar of the engines grew louder. Flashlights cut through the dark, voices shouting. My heart hammered, but I forced myself to keep moving. Branches whipped at my face, roots caught at my shoes, but I didn't stop. Finally, the trees thinned, and I saw it, a clearing where the service road cut across the woods. And there, as if fate had thrown us a lifeline, an old pickup truck sat abandoned near the edge. "Keys, check the keys!" Richard gasped, collapsing against the side of the truck. I yanked the door open, praying harder than I ever had in my life. My hands shook as I looked under the visor, then under the seat. Nothing. My stomach dropped. But then, on the floor near the pedals, I saw them. A rusted set of keys glinting faintly in the moonlight. My hands fumbled as I shoved the key into the ignition. For a second, the engine sputtered like it was mocking me. Then, with a loud cough and a burst of smoke, it roared to life. Relief flooded me so hard my knees nearly gave out. I helped the mayor's wife climb into the passenger seat and half-lifted Richard into the back. Then I slammed the door, jumped behind the wheel, and pressed the gas. The truck lurched forward, rattling like it might fall apart, but it moved. That was all that mattered. Behind us, shouts erupted. Flashlights swung wildly. Gunshots cracked through the air, bullets slicing past as the truck bounced down the dirt path. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, refusing to let go. The headlights barely lit the overgrown road, and every bump threatened to throw us off course, but I kept going. Faster. Always faster. The gunfire grew fainter, swallowed by the roar of the engine and the pounding of my own heartbeat. Finally, after what felt like forever, the woods thinned, and we burst onto a paved road. City lights shimmered faintly in the distance. The mayor's wife leaned back in her seat, tears streaking her face. Richard groaned from the back, his hands still pressed to his wound, but he was alive. Against every odd, every doubt, we had made it out. I pulled the truck over on the shoulder, my hands trembling as the adrenaline began to fade. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just sat there in stunned silence, the night around us eerily calm compared to the chaos we had just escaped. Finally, the mayor's wife turned to me, her eyes wide with disbelief. How did you know where to find me?" I hesitated, the weight of my secret pressing down hard. The truth was messy, complicated, and dangerous. I had known because I had once been part of the same network that had taken her. I had run from them, escaped with nothing but my life, but I had remembered their patterns, their hiding places. "I just knew," I said finally, my voice quiet. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. She reached out and placed her hand over mine, her touch trembling but firm. "You saved my life." Her voice broke, raw with emotion. "No one will ever believe it was a runaway boy who did this. But I'll never forget." I looked down at our hands, the weight of everything sinking in. For the first time in years, I felt something I thought I'd lost, purpose. As the first streaks of dawn began to creep across the horizon, painting the sky in pale blue, I knew this was far from the end. The men who had taken her would come after me now. I wasn't invisible anymore. But maybe that was the point. For once, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward it. And as the mayor's wife leaned against the seat, safe for now, and Richard clung to life in the back, I realized the unbelievable part wasn't just that we survived, it was that, somehow, a runaway kid like me had become the one thing standing between life and death for people who had never even known my name. There's another story on your screen right now, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. And, if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. There's so much more I want to share with you.